Now it's time to put the eyes in on Skye. As you can see, I have turned the painting at an angle so I can better see the eyes to paint them. Please feel free to turn your painting so that it works best for you. The eyes are the windows to the soul, truly, and I like to put them in early on. I kind of feel like then my subject is watching me to make sure I do a good job of painting them. This is a new pastel black 229 that I've put a very sharp point on. That I'm outlining the eye, going around the rim. I've gone back to my Creative color to get a sharper edge, to get that rim outlined. You can see that the white pencil that we put in earlier on the rim is still there. Take your time to get the shape right. It's very important. I'm going to show you a really wonderful way of putting in eyes. This is that lower outside rim. Kind of feathering that, not making it as distinct. And back to my black new pastel. Softly put in some darker color. Now I can't do this with the Creative Color black pastel pencil. That's why I've switched to the new pastel. Coloring in that rim a little bit and putting in the pupil. Avoiding the highlight, which we marked earlier with our white pastel pencil. Speaking of which, I'm going to use now to put in a little highlight on the rim to punch that up a little bit. Now this is Cocoa Brown 253. We're going to flat color the iris just like you color in a coloring book. So I'm filling in the iris, avoiding the highlight with the 253 new pastel. Next, I am going to add color with Indian Red, which is 263. So I'm adding the majority of the color at the top of the eye and bringing it down around. Skye's eyes were particularly dark brown, so I'm going to be adding darker colors than perhaps I normally would. Now this is 353 Cordovan, so I'm going even darker. Already her eye is starting to take on dimension. Adding the dark color around the pupil and the highlight. A little more Indian Red. And some more black, darkening that pupil and up under that eyelid. There's a shadow under there. A lot of people make a mistake by not adding the shadow. It just doesn't look right. More Indian Red. Now I'm using 266 Pale Vermilion to add some red orange, where the highlight, secondary highlight, would be in the eye. So we really want to pop the color here. And then over top of that, some 233 Raw Sienna. Just going to stroke that in softly. More Indian red. This is 219 light gray. I'm putting, there's a little tiny reflected light in there. So I use the gray. It needs to be a little brighter. So I'm going to go over it with the white charcoal pencil. White charcoal pencil has many uses. I just love it. I'm going to use my white 211 New Pastel, the point, to put in the bright hot spot highlight in the eye. Really brings life to it. Isn't that beautiful? I just love it. Now she's watching us make sure we do things right. Now on the lower rim, I'm going to use 235 light blue pastel to add a blue tint to that. I may come back and change that later. Now I'm going to use my 6B charcoal pencil. Just add some black under that rim. We don't want it solid blue, so I'm just adding some color and making a jagged edge there where it goes into the fur. Adding a little more 263. So you want to go back and forth with your color until you get it just the way you like it. I'm pretty happy with that. Now we're going to paint the second eye, which is in shadow, very much in shadow. You can hardly see it. So this is the 229 black New Pastel that we're starting with. So because this eye is so much in shadow, we're going to have to do darker colors this time. So I'm outlining it with the 229. Putting in the pupil. And there's just a little tiny highlight that's visible here. I'm going to put the base colors in with 253 of the iris, just like I did before. Then 263 Indian red. It's a great color. It has a lot of red in it. Hence its name, but it's a wonderful brown. I'm coloring over all the 253. And now I'm going to the cordovan. Cordovan is really a Mars violet. Now this, remember, this eye is very, very dark. So I'm coloring over my other two colors. So I've added 3 layers now to get it really dark. I'll leave it a little bit of light, lighter touch in the middle. I'm going over it with my black again. Lightly, not darkly, not adding a lot of color, but lightly. This eye is in shadow. It makes a difference. And now we're going to add a different kind of color. This is 224 violet. So rather than use the highlight colors we use in the other eye, we're going to use the violet. The violet will help that eye to look a little rounder and come forward. I like that color. This is 305 Spruce Blue. It's a navy blue. So we're going to color over the violet with the spruce blue. Spruce blue is a super color. It's just a dark, dark blue. I'm going to add a little more violet-y color in there. Just a little bit. Add a little bit more character to that eye. And now for a final touch, I'm going to use 314 Old Lilac, which is a pink. Just add a couple of highlights with this pink. We don't want them too strong. So we'll just add a couple of highlights there. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm liking the way that looks. They may be a little bright. I may have to dull them down. Back to my black. We don't want a strong highlight in this eye because it is almost completely hidden in shadow. So I'm darkening it down even further. A little more Indian red. Now I'm kind of looking at both eyes to see if I need to add anything. I've decided I need a brighter blue. This is Tile Blue 415 that I'm adding to the rim. I wasn't totally happy. It wasn't quite bright enough. I'm going to add a little bit in the corner of the other eye. And now we're going to move on to the nose. Now I've drawn my nose off and outlined it with my Create-A-Color black pencil, and I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add a few white hairs to it. Now I'm going to use my 6B charcoal pencil on its side at an angle. You can see that the white hairs show right through. So I'm adding the shadow area around the nose. Now I'm going to use my gray, 7047 light gray, to add some base coats down on the face around the nose. Now I'm using my graphite pencil to draw in the edge of the bed. I forgot to do that, so I'm drawing it in now, the braid on the edge of that little pillow or blanket that she's sleeping on. Now I'm going to use my white charcoal pencil to draw in the highlights that are on the nose to outline the nostril. It's going to show through when we add our colors. Now the nose is black, but we don't want it to appear dead. If we use just plain black, that wouldn't be as good as doing this. So I'm going to add an initial layer of Spruce Blue 305 New Pastel. So you can see I'm lightly adding that. I'm going over my black lines and my white lines because they're going to show through because we put the charcoal and the white charcoal pencil down first. So I can still see those lines. So just putting a light coat. When I'm painting things that are black, I always put down the blue or maybe a purple underneath. Take opportunity to use lots of color when you paint. I'm going back and forth, evening that out. using a light feathery stroke. I'm putting a little more gray, medium gray, just so you can see how it fits into the face. Now this is the black new pastel, 229. So now I'm going over it with black. I'm not pressing super hard. The light strikes that upper edge of the nose. I'm darkening the darks, applying more pressure on the bottom side of the nose, which is in shadow. Darkening the nostril. It's a little shadow area underneath. It's gradually building up the color. Applying a little more pressure on the shadow side. Now I'm adding some of that violet we used in the eye, 224, on the shadow side of the nose for interest. So here again, if I use a color in one place, I like to use it in another place if I can. Back to the black, continuing to get it darker and darker. I like the violet in there. It's very nice. Now we're going to use the Blackest Black, the 700.5 Rembrandt Black. And I'm putting it mostly on the shadow side. It's rich, it's dark, it's velvety to finish up that nose. I'm refining the shape with my black pastel. Make sure it's like it's supposed to be before we add the highlights on the nose. Now I'm using a 299 gray to add a highlight on the nostril, underneath the nostril. I don't want to use a white because this is in shadow, so we don't want it to be too great a contrast. And now we're going to add some highlights on the nose with a 235 light blue. You could also use some of your 415 tile blue, although I did not. You could. So I'm using a light layer on that top side of the nose where the light strikes. And then I'm going to make some little tiny dots of highlight on those little sections of the dog's nose. I don't want them to be too noticeable. Putting a little blue on that rim of the nostril that's in shadow. Now I'm going to use my white charcoal pencil to draw in those little hairs from the dog's fur that come across the nose. Using a little black in between the hairs so they show more. Making some final adjustments to the nose. We can always add more things later. I hope you've enjoyed this section. This completes the nose and eyes. Stay tuned for part 3. See you then.